let's get to Hot or Cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. The premise is tennis is the SEC, a basketball conference now. Hot or Cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. CityHeatandAir.com. Are you making the argument for or against, Caleb?
I'm going to make the argument for, in that it's going to be even more pronounced in the next few years.
Okay, so let's get to hot or cold. You can set this up however you would like, but you've got some parameters, whatever iter you want to call it, that that the SEC is a basketball conference. So how are we breaking this up? If we agree it's hot, if we disagree it's cold?
Yes. Well, if this is yes, basically I'm going to give out pieces of evidence, and you're going to say if that's a strong piece of evidence, it's hot. If it's a weak piece of evidence, it's cold.
That's hot.
All right, go.
And I'm going to add a few more, by the way, in this too.
Great.
First off, Florida winning the basketball national title.
That's hot.
You can't be a basketball conference unless you win a national title. Like, you can't have a couple teams in the Final Four each and every year and not win a national title. So you have to win a national title to be considered a basketball conference. That's like a prerequisite.
Yes,
exactly. Remedial reading. You have to be able to do that or get a good score in the ACT. By the way, I got a new ID the other day, and it said not real ID, ACT only. I'm 51 years old. What the hell am I taking the ACT for?
Oh my God, that is so funny.
So I don't know if it's a real ID or not. Go ahead, Caleb.
All right, so next, the SEC hasn't had a national title in football in 3 years.
That's hot.
It is, guys. The Big Ten's looking like the preeminent football conference right now, and it pains me to say that, and I never thought I would say that, but that is a strong factor in Caleb's argument. The SEC is a basketball conference.
All right, next. While the SEC dominated the NCAA tournament with a record 14 teams and 16 teams, and also had half the Final Four and half the Elite Eight, the Big Ten had more teams in the college football playoff than the SEC. So it looks like the Big Ten was deeper in football and the SEC was deeper in basketball.
Okay, so no, the 14's a big deal. Now, I thought that was too many, but I think that tells you that Greg Sankey and the SEC, that they were pushing to get as many teams in as possible, which in turn, even though it may be orchestrated, makes them a basketball conference. So I'll give you this.
That's hot.
In our poll question, the SEC is still a football conference, now a basketball conference. And I'm going to go with the latter. Caleb, hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandAir.com. Caleb will continue to make his point 30 seconds after we hear from City Heating and Air, cityheatandAir.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
All right, Caleb, what's next?
All right, I actually have a few things on this. I'm going to add a few. So here's one interesting one. I think the future is going to this gap is going to become more pronounced. Tell me if you disagree, or is that hot or cold, Dave? Do you disagree or agree?
Give it to me again.
I think the future, this gap is going to become wider. It's going to become even more of a basketball conference and less of a football conference.
Well, if the SEC has its way, it appears that's the direction they're going, and the Big Ten is going with NIL money to retain players instead of going elsewhere in the transfer portal in the NIL. So if the direction continues, yes, it's going to be even more of a basketball conference. We got a couple of people asking us about Zakai Ziegler. I've been digging on that for the 5th year. I don't think that's in the cards, but I'm not willing to rule it out altogether. But wanted to address it since it's become a topic of conversation. Daniel says that the SEC went back and forth in football many times and are currently the everything but lacrosse conference. Big Ten hadn't been back-to-back since 1950s. We everything conference. So, Caleb, what's next?
Big Ten hasn't had, and SEC haven't had a gap in TV revenue that they're about to have. And so here's where this is going to become more pronounced. The gap in revenue, Dave, is only going to make a difference in football, right? It's not going to make a difference in basketball, like with the gap in like TV revenue.
If you want to spend money in basketball, you can spend it as much as you need to spend without breaking the bank, is kind of what you're saying, right?
Right, exactly.
Like nobody's going to say, man, if I had an extra $1 million in basketball, I could bring in Cooper Flag. Chances are that $1 million's going to be available for the right player.
Right, exactly. So basically, the football.
Not to interrupt. Whereas football, you could run out of money. So,
exactly, which is why it's a huge deal. This TV gap in revenue between the Big Ten and the SEC. I've been talking about this, guys, for 2 years, and it's pronounced for the next 6 years. The Big Ten is going to be raking in $1 billion in TV revenue every year, and the SEC is going to be raking in $330 million. That's it. That's a huge gap. So the Big Ten is going to have a lot more money to spend. That's all going to make a difference in football. But here's the other interesting point, Dave, and I actually want to drive this home. I think the reason that's going to help the Big Ten in football. The thing that's going to help the SEC in basketball, though, that's going to help it move in the Big Ten. Do you want to know when your typical Big Ten games are in basketball?
They're late at night, right?
They're Thursday nights and Sunday afternoons.
That's terrible.
Yeah, oftentimes Fridays. They're either Thursday and Sunday or Friday and Monday. The SEC is Tuesday night and Wednesday night in the middle of the week, and then Saturday, right?
Yep.
Who do you think is going to draw better TV ratings in basketball with the different times? It's going to be the SEC over the next 10 years.
Agreed.
The Big Ten is going to draw no interest for their times for TV games. On the flip side, as we have learned, and you guys can call me crazy on this because I know a lot of SEC fans disagree, but the Big Ten's right. The Big Ten made a huge gamble a couple of years ago with their TV times for football. They put their primetime games at noon kickoffs on Saturday. People thought it was stupid. Dave, it's worked. People love noon kickoffs.
It has worked, and it gets the day off and started. I give them a lot of credit. The TV networks, who would that have been last year?
CBS, NBC, and Fox.
I give them a lot of credit in their pregame show. I mean, it stacks up to College Game Day to me. So
It does.
I didn't think that they could do that. I didn't think that ultimately the noon game would work. And I'm sure that UCLA and USC and Oregon, I'm sure they're not too happy about the noon game that when it's Eastern time, but they seemingly have made it work, and it gets the day off to a great start. It does.
It does.
If you're, I mean, nowadays too, you got to factor in how easy is it to have a TV at a tailgate. It's not that difficult. So
Right.
Those are more eyeballs on your product, and yeah, it just is seamless. It feels like they copied the NFL. Remember how at least me, I would get out of church and I knew that I had plenty of time to get in front of a TV by 1 o'clock because the game would kick off at 1:05.
Yep.
And then my day's set. Now, am I more likely to watch Fox and the NFC because that's what I started with? Probably. So I think the casual fan, let's say they don't have a Big Ten or SEC bias, might just stick with the Big Ten all day. And that's what you don't want.
Oh, exactly. No, that's a great point. You're right. And it's a very casual, like, what is, even let's take the fan who doesn't care about football. They wake up at, the college kid wakes up at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 in the morning. They decide, let's go to brunch at our local bar down the road. You know what I mean? They go to brunch at what's on TV everywhere at noon. That their Big Ten schools kick off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so,
and the SEC is meanwhile doing South Carolina at Vanderbilt.
Yes, they're doing that for noon so they can get all their big games at night. Well, spoiler alert, guys, in a lot of places outside of the SEC, people who you could reach in college or elsewhere, they're going out and getting hammered at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, they just are. So, like, you're not reaching much of a new audience with your night games. You're reaching a new audience with your noon games, honestly.
Agreed. So
That's hot.
all right, what's next?
And then finally, and I want to throw out this point, the SEC is the SEC a basketball conference, or is the SEC just an everything conference? Because they do seem to dominate in women's basketball, baseball, softball, you name it.
That's hot.
I'm going to go in everything conference, but I will say, as much as it pains me to say this, that the SEC has slipped in terms of a football conference. According to our poll question, the SEC is still a football conference, now a basketball conference. Football conference, 92% of the vote. So I'm not surprised, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Click that thumbs up button so we can be a part of your day as we're live weekdays at 10 a.m. Wherever you pod or stream, we're there as well. So, Caleb, the numbers you shared with the television contracts, we've gone back and forth a little bit on. I think I'm right if the SEC and Big Ten merge by 2030, because then all the money is going to be in one big pot, right?
Right.
I think you're right if they go beyond 2030 and they haven't merged. And at that point, you've had 5 years into this contract. The Big Ten could separate itself. At least the top teams could separate themselves from the SEC. There's no Nick Saban nowadays. Now you don't have a Jim Harbaugh, who you would think would press the envelope and get Michigan in a position to win a national championship. But as a whole, I'm not sure that the SEC is that much better in coaching than the Big Ten. And let's not forget, too, when we talk about overall money, I know we think about NIL because that's the newest thing to talk about. But you have Bill Belichick making $10 million at North Carolina. Coaches have to get paid. So, I mean, if you're able to retain a coach like Josh Heupel, let's just say Michigan came calling. Part of that TV money might be to retain Josh Heupel, and that's less power you have with less cash in hand.
Right. That's a huge point. And this is where I was going to get to that exact point, because Dave, how humiliating is it going to be? Say 5 years, say we're 7 years into the contract. It's 2031. Okay. And the gap has really gotten big with these schools. Kirby Smart retires. He's had a great run. He's like, you know what? I don't really feel like doing this anymore. Okay. Let's just say
I feel like I'll retire before Kirby Smart retires.
Okay. I mean, I can see that, but like, let's just say Kirby Smart does retire. Georgia has an opening. Purdue has an opening. There's a coach there's a top coach that they're both in the sweepstakes for, and we find out Purdue has more money to offer him than Georgia does, and he picks Purdue.
Well, you'd be insane to go to Purdue over Georgia.
Yeah, but what if the gap is like $5 million?
You'd be insane to go to Purdue over
Take
Georgia.
the money. I mean, I'm with you, but like some coaches might take the money. Or what if it's not the coach? Forget the coach. What if we find out these schools are starting to out-recruit the SEC because they're spending more on players? Like Purdue out-recruits Georgia and Alabama.
Okay, you're asking me if a mid-level Big Ten team could compete with a top SEC team in terms of luring a coach and in terms of luring players because they just have more money. My answer to that is going to be no chance. I'll give you Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, because they're of the same ilk as the top SEC schools. And if they have more money, sure. If little Johnny Hooker decides that he's going to go to a Penn State because they're paying him $5 million more a year, then little Johnny Hooker, take off. But if little Johnny Hooker is going to go to Purdue or Northwestern to make $5 million more, I'm going to have to sit down and talk to little Johnny Hooker.
Okay, what if you're on the fringe, though? Because Purdue and Northwestern are bottom feeders. You're right. What if it's like a Wisconsin or an Iowa, where it's like just a tier below like those top? Then it gets tough.
It gets tough. And then who was the one kid that most recently spurned an offer from Tennessee? And did he go to Maryland? I'm trying to remember.
Minnesota.
That was bizarre. That sounded like a money grab to me.
It did. Well, that was PJ Fleck trying to pull a Butch Jones. He opened a checkbook to get a kid out of Tennessee so he could go sell to everybody, I got a kid out of Tennessee. Something Butch Jones would do.
It felt like a money grab. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it's necessarily going to stick from what I've heard, but that's a topic for another day. To me, with the SEC, you have a certain amount of panache still that outside of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, you don't have. So you mentioned Wisconsin. Who are some other teams you mentioned?
I threw out, what about Iowa? One that's kind of knocked on the door in the past, but has never like really pushed it down.
Hey, what, man? If you're jumping for just cash and you have no desire to win a championship, because you're not going to win a championship at Iowa, can we agree on that?
Well, I don't know. This is the thing. Isn't this gap in revenue going to start to favor the SEC? I mean, the Big Ten to a certain degree. Dave, 20 years ago, wouldn't you have considered Clemson on par with Iowa as a football program?
You mean a lower par than they are now? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, well, yeah. Clemson 20 years ago was on this. If I asked you Clemson, Iowa, and it was 2004, and I said, who's a better program? You'd be like, they're about the same.
Yeah.
And
Pre-Dabo.
what happened? Yeah, pre-Dabo. And what happened? Clemson went and won 2 national titles.
Well, they got a great coach, though.
They got and
going to go to Iowa.
They got a great coach, and then a bunch of other circumstances fell in their favor. I'm saying it's not. I'm saying, guys, we may not be far off from the mid-level Big Ten teams being able to compete for championships in a way that the mid-level SEC teams like South Carolina can't.
I don't think so, because in the Big Ten, you're still going to get beat up by Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Clemson wasn't getting beat up by anybody. They came along under Dabo at a time when the rest of the conference struggled.
But that's the same with the mid-level SEC teams where, like, okay, even at their peak, like South Carolina under Steve Spurrier never won an SEC title and never could. But I'm saying those schools could be like South Carolina under Steve Spurrier level in certain times.